Alright folks, let me tell you a story that once made some Americans extremely uncomfortable. Not a war story, not a spy story, a cow eyeball story. Yeah, you heard that right. Picture this. A freezing slaughterhouse warehouse somewhere in Inner Mongolia. Middle of the night. Pitch black. The kind of dark where you can't even see your own fingers. And suddenly, a guy walks into the freezer. Temperature minus 18 degrees Celsius. Inside the freezer are mountains of frozen cow eyeballs. Tons of them. Literally 10 tons. And this guy? He starts digging into them one by one with his bare hands. Now, if you're American and you hear that story, you probably wake up at 3 a.m., touch your own eyes, and whisper, "Yep, still there." But here's the twist. The guy doing this wasn't a butcher. He was a scientist. His name was Ling Pixiu. And what he was digging out of those eyeballs wasn't horror movie material. He was digging out something even more terrifying. For American pharmaceutical companies, hyaluronic acid. Now today, hyaluronic acid is everywhere. Skincare, cosmetics, face creams. Instagram influencers rubbing it on their cheeks like miracle sauce. But 40 years ago, this stuff was rarer than gold. Literally, back then, it wasn't for beauty. It was used in eye surgery, especially cataract operations. Without it, many surgeries simply couldn't happen. And guess who controlled the technology? Yep, the United States. At the time, hyaluronic acid cost about 2 million yuan per kilogram. That's roughly 50 times the price of gold. So if you were running that business back then, you basically owned a money printing machine. And meanwhile in China, millions of patients couldn't afford eye surgery. People literally lost their sight because the medicine was too expensive. So China launched a national research program, and Ling Pixiu decided to take on the challenge. Only problem? Nobody in China knew how to make the stuff. There were no manuals, no blueprints, no Google. Just one rumor. Hey, maybe there's some of that stuff inside cow eyeballs. So Ling said, "Alright then, let's go find some cows." Now remember, this was the 1980s. No high-speed trains. No research budget like Silicon Valley. Ling took a slow train for over 1,000 kilometers. Destination: a meat processing plant in Hulan-Vor. And that's where the famous cow eyeball operation began. 3 months. 10 tons of frozen eyeballs. Hand extraction. Imagine explaining that job to your parents. "Son, what are you doing for work?" "Oh, nothing special. Just digging eyeballs out of frozen cow heads." And those eyeballs? They were frozen solid, like little billiard balls. After months of work, Ling's hands were permanently damaged. Even today, they still shake. The lab conditions were so rough that ultraviolet lamps sometimes burned his eyes. At one point, he developed photokeratitis. That's basically sunburn inside your eyeballs. Most people would quit right there. Ling didn't. He just came back to the lab the next day. Because back then, Chinese scientists were basically built different. After 10 years of research, Ling finally cracked the problem. But here's where things get interesting. While American labs were still extracting hyaluronic acid from animal tissue, Ling developed something better: microbial fermentation. Basically teaching bacteria to produce the molecules, which meant one thing: mass production. And when production exploded, the price collapsed from 2 million per kilogram down to about 1% of that. Overnight, a gigantic high-profit industry suddenly stopped printing money. Imagine selling luxury steaks for $1,000 a plate, and suddenly someone opens a factory selling it for $10. Yeah, that's what happened. But Ling didn't stop there. His team developed new ophthalmic injection technology. Cataract surgeries that once took hours could now be done in minutes. Today, even small community hospitals can perform them. sometimes for free. And every year, more than 2 million people regain their eyesight thanks to this technology. Not bad for a guy who started his research career digging eyeballs out of cows. Of course, when American companies realized what was happening, they tried their usual strategy. Not war, not sanctions, recruitment. They checked Ling's salary. It was about 100 yuan per month. So they made an offer. A huge one. $100,000 a year. Back then, that was like offering someone a private island and a yacht. But Ling turned it down. His answer was simple. The future of the hyaluronic acid industry will be in China. Turns out, he was right. Today, China produces over 80% of the world's hyaluronic acid supply, which means the molecule that once cost more than gold is now cheap enough to show up in face creams, eye drops, and skincare products everywhere. But Ling had one more surprise. Instead of selling his patents to big cosmetic companies, he started his own brand called Dr. Ling. And here's the funny part. The products weren't expensive. In fact, they were way cheaper than many international brands. Imagine inventing revolutionary technology and then pricing it like a neighborhood grocery item. That's basically what happened. His idea was simple. Advanced science shouldn't only belong to luxury brands. It should belong to ordinary people. And honestly, that might be the most shocking part of this whole story. Not the cow eyeballs, not the price collapse, not even the broken monopoly, but the idea that a scientist spent his entire career working on one molecule, just so millions of strangers could see again. And maybe have slightly better skin while they're at it. Now that's what I call a pretty wild scientific journey. I am the Delian Imperial Sister who does not talk about sex. See you in the next video.